the JD's property to be seized and its location. There's even a form, and the form requires, that's form 14 of Appendix A. When you're applying for execution, you must give a list of the JD's property that you want to be attached and sold. Again, if a decree holder wants property belonging to a JD, but the property is not in his possession, it's his responsibility to tell the auctioneer, or to tell the court that this is the property, it is at this place, and so holds it. Many of you will agree that in many cases, in fact in most cases, advocates do not do this. They just give you a name. Go and execute against the property of so and so. And so what sometimes we see when an auctioneer renders his bill finally, there's the line where he says investigation. But if you look at your rules, there's nothing. There's no provision made for that investigation, because you're not supposed to be investigating. All that should be ascertained beforehand. And so what happens is you ruin your own reputations by going and attaching the wrong property, or attaching too little or too much. And for me, my challenge, as somebody who has practiced, as somebody who has instructed auctioneers, is I think the auctioneers, as a profession, you need to challenge those who give you instructions to actually be more proactive in their work, so that they can assist you in making a successful recovery. I don't expect it to be one-on-one when somebody gives you a warrant and you say, oh, you haven't included this, so, because he'll take it and give it to somebody else who's willing. So that might not help you. But now, where there's a lot of consultation by everybody on these things, you can actually get a situation whereby your union, your association, and the law society can meet and start talking about these things. Because it is a duty of the advocates, they must live up to it, and you must nudge them towards doing that so that it helps you. Just to illustrate how that can become a problem, I'm just going to cite two cases that are fairly well known that went to the Court of Appeal. And they illustrate the fact that under Section 26 of the Auctioneers Act, a person who suffers loss by a wrongful exercise of power, for instance, a wrongful attachment or trespass to goods, by a licensed auctioneer may sue for damages. So remember, if you attach against the correct goods, the judgment debtor's goods, you're covered by immunity. If you don't, then you're on your own. The first is a 1984 case, Blasio Simiu. I think it was a case from Bungoma, and it was a case of pregnancy compensation, but the warrants were issued and directed to a lady called Dorcas. When the warrants were prepared, again it was Dorcas against whom it was supposed to be executed. But when they went to the home, they instead executed the property belonging to her father. And so the matter, the father sued and said, why have you attached my property? It went all the way to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal said that because the decree holder set in motion the process of execution against the wrong person, he would become liable for damages. So be careful if you go outside your mandate and go against somebody else's property, then you'll be liable personally. The other case was a 1986 case, this one from Kisi, Aroni Sure and 9 others versus Yesare Nyamaiko. Again, warrants against two defendants. The auctioneer went to a village and attached 13 heads of cattle, 31 iron sheets and furniture. And 10 people objected. They said, these are our animals. In fact, before that objection was filed, 4 of the cattle had already been released. It went on appeal to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal said that the deputy registrar who had made the decision ought to have considered the claims of those who had said there was wrongful attachment. But in that case, they also say the auctioneer was wrong in attaching that property. And so as auctioneers, what are the things that you can do to improve your profession? What are the things that you can do to comply with the Constitution? Because that's an important consideration for your work as you go ahead. Why do we say this? Because one of the things that is happening around the world, especially in the developed countries, is business has slowed down. People don't have as much money as they used to, and so they are relocating to the developed world. And one of the things that determines where they're going to go is, quite apart from the ease of registration, taxes, one of the things they want to know is, if there's a dispute, how easy is it to resolve it? If I'm claiming money from somebody, from a debtor, how fast can I get it? And so they want to know, how does the justice system work? You're an important part in the administration of justice. You don't want the courts to deliver a judgment and then auctioneers be unable to do it correctly. So it's important that you look at your own code of conduct, your own act, the way that you do things, and find out what are some of the things we can do better. I would suggest the following things. First, on the issue of consumer protection. One of the things that the Constitution provided in Article 46, I believe, let me just check that, is consumer rights. If you're providing services and somebody else is a consumer, there are certain rights that they have. So Section 36 has come up and said you've got to do that. Last year, the Parliament passed the Consumer Protection Act, which is a very interesting act because it says in Section 94 that on every regulatory body, which I presume the Auctioneers Licensing Board is a regulatory body, they say you have to get one person from a consumer representative. I don't know what that will mean, but it means the Law Society, because it regulates, has to have a consumer representation, and they actually define who these consumers are. And so you'll actually have a situation whereby not just the Law Society, the Office of the President, the Judiciary, you yourselves have representation, but you now have to get consumers getting involved in the work that you're doing. And I'm sure when they come in, they'll come with all the grievances that they've ever had and say, we've got to do things differently. But because of that, I think one of the things you need to do in respect to the consumer is to review your own code of conduct to conform to the Constitution. Last week, if you read the papers, the Secretary of the Law Society informed the nation that there were, not really advocates, but there were people in this part of the country who were practicing without practicing certificates. And I think the number was 9 or something like that. And one of them had never taken a practicing certificate since 1996. So you can see there's a problem. I don't know whether you have that problem of auctioneers who either have been struck off or have never had licenses and are continuing to practice. But that's something you need to think about, because in the Law Society, when I've been at the disciplinary committee, one of the things we've said is you need to have an inspectorate. What will it do? Go around the country and just find out that if Mr.